Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 11, The Perfect Society for Social Classes, Text 18 to 20. Ritam ritabhyam jiveta Ritena pram ritenava Satyan ritabhyam apiva Naswa vritya kadachana Ritam ritabhyam jiveta Mritena pram ritenava Satyan ritabhyam apiva Naswa vritya kadachana Rita amritabhyam of the means of livelihood, known as Rita and Amrita. Jiveta, one may live. Mritena, by the profession of Mrita. Pramritena, va, or by the profession of Pramrita. Satyan ritabhyam api, even by the profession of Satyan Rita. Va, or, na, never. Shwavritya, by the profession of the dogs. Kadachana, at any time. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the time of emergency, one may accept any of the various types of professions known as Rita, Amrita, Mrita, Pramrita, and Satyanrita. But one should not at any time accept the profession of a dog. The profession of the Chichila, collecting grains from the field, is called Rita. Collecting without begging is called Amrita. Begging grains is called Mrita. Tilling the ground is called Pramrita. And trade is called Satyanrita. Engaging in the service of low-grade persons, however, is called Shwavrita, the profession of the dogs. Specifically, Brahmanas and Kshatriyas should not engage in the low and abominable service of Shudras. Brahmanas should be well acquainted with all the Vedic knowledge, and Kshatriyas should be well acquainted with the worship of demigods. Purport. As stated in the Bhagavad-Gita 4.13, Chaturavanya maya shvistam guna karma vibhagashaha. The four divisions of human society were created by the Supreme Lord according to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them. Formerly, the principle of dividing human society into four sections, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, was strictly followed. But because of gradual neglect of the Varna ashram principles, Varna Sankara population developed, and the entire institution has now been lost. In this age of Kali, practically everyone is a Shudra, Kalau Shudra Sambhava. And finding anyone who's a Brahmin, Kshatriya, or a Vaishya is very difficult. Although the Krishna consciousness movement is a movement of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, it is trying to re-establish the divine Varnashram institution. For without this division of society, there cannot be peace and prosperity anywhere. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Taramane Namaste Saraswatum Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatya De Satarne. So I would also like to ask for the blessings of the devotees, especially the senior devotees, so I can say something which is correct and hopefully of some use. Varna Ashram, one of the controversial topics in ISKCON. It rates up there with where the jiva came from. And other such topics which we don't have to mention to stir everyone's controversial side. But here I'll try to say something according to my understanding, and hopefully I don't add to the confusion, because there's enough of that. Just like Srila Prabhupada said, there are plenty of hogs and dogs in Vrindavan. We don't have to act in such a way as to add to the hogs and dogs. There's enough of them. Don't worry about it. As we've heard in the previous classes, Varnashrama Acharvitaha Purushena Puman. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Roy, what is the basis of spiritual advancement, Ramananda Roy immediately said, Varnashrama Acharvitaha Purushena Puman. The basic principle of civilization is Varna and Ashram. This is also emphasized by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad-Gita. In Bhagavad-Gita there are 700 verses which summarize the 10 billion verses from the Vedas. If you learn 700 verses in Bhagavad-Gita, then you know more or less the essence of all the Vedic knowledge. But in the Bhagavad-Gita there are certain verses that are outstanding. Especially 2 verses are repeated twice, completely. 1 verse is repeated half. But the 2 verses that are repeated twice, one of them we all know, Manmana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mame Vaishasi Satyam Te Pratijani Priyosti Me. Or Manmana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mame Vaishasi Yuktaivam Atmanam Matparayanaha. Engage your mind always in thinking of me, engage yourself in my service, and completely surrender to me, being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. But there's another verse which may not be so famous, but it's also repeated twice. Shreya swadamo viguna paradharma sunustita. Shreya dharmos nigdinam shreyak paradharmo bhayavaha. It is better to perform one's own prescribed duty than someone else's prescribed duty. Destruction in the course of one's own duty is not good, but to follow someone else's duty is dangerous. It's better than to follow someone else's duty, because to follow someone else's duty is dangerous. In other words, Srila Rupa Goswami has told us there are 2 aspects of either living in the material world we should know about, or to make spiritual progress we should know about. Or Srila Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad-Gita, there are 2 types of dharma. Swadharma. One of them is Swadharma under the Varna and Ashram system, and the other is Swadharma given by the acharyas in disciple succession. The best thing is to follow the Swadharma given by the acharyas in disciple succession, but if one is not so inclined, then one must follow the Dharma given under the Varna and Ashram system. Otherwise, one is an animal. Or as it says in this verse, or less than an animal actually, as it says in this verse, that Kalo Sudra Sambhava. In the age of Kali, everyone is born a Shudra. But by modern education, one becomes less than an animal. That's by Srila Bhakti-yoga Thakur. In the absence of Varna and Ashram, then it is very likely people will become animals, or less than animals. Animal doesn't mean, we're not trying to criticize animals. The devotee is friend to everyone, even the animals. But animal means simply concerned with eating, sleeping, mating, defending, or trying to get better eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Unfortunately, human beings, in the attempt to improve their eating and their sleeping and their mating and defending, have become more degraded than even the lower species of life. Therefore, Varna and Ashram is important, but Srila Prabhupada did not try to establish Varna and Ashram at the beginning. Now, we find in Prabhupada's teachings, in 1977, Srila Prabhupada is talking about the other 50% of his teachings. So, of course, this is not, and here we find Prabhupada is also explaining that the Krishna consciousness movement is trying to reestablish Varna and Ashram. So how does that fit in? According to my understanding, Srila Prabhupada had around 10 years to present everything to us, because whatever he didn't present to us, probably in the next 10,000 years wouldn't be presented. Now that doesn't mean that everything that Prabhupada presented to us, he expected us to immediately implement completely. For instance, Gurukul. Actually, I was part of the first Gurukul. That was in 1971 in Dallas, Texas. Before we moved to Gurley Street, we were in Turtle Creek, and we had a Gurukul there. There was around 10 or 15 householders with a lot of children, and we started Gurukul there. Actually, I was the temple president, but don't tell anyone. But then my former temple president, Mohanananda, came back, and he had the idea of starting a bigger Gurukul. So as soon as he came back, he took the place of the temple president, and I became the treasurer. Unfortunately, Mohanananda, for me, Mohanananda loved to spend money, especially money we didn't have, which was a problem for me, because I was trained up by a devotee named Gargamuni how to be the temple treasurer. And Gargamuni taught me one principle that Srila Prabhupada taught him: you take the money in, but you don't give anything out. So that was my propensity anyhow, so it went along with my modes of nature. Unfortunately, Mohanananda was expert at giving everything out, but he wasn't very expert at getting anything in, which was a problem. But in any case, he wrote to Srila Prabhupada and said, we found this building, and I think it would be a very nice building, and we can establish a Gurukul there. So I thought, since Srila Prabhupada is omniscient, he would know where my where my temple president was at, and he would say, no, first you learn how to deal with money, and then we'll buy the building. No, Prabhupada said, "Wow, that's a great idea. Immediately buy it." And I was like, "Wow, with what?" And Prabhupada said, "I'll give a loan, we'll buy it, we have to get that building." So, since I was against the whole idea, I became the temple cook. And my assistant was Bir Krishna Maharaj, Bhakta something. In any case, Prabhupada wanted to establish the Gurukul, and as we know, the Gurukul had its difficulties. But that doesn't mean that Prabhupada was dissuaded because he expected difficulties. He had to establish Gurukul somehow or another with what was available. Although the building itself couldn't really accommodate 100 children, and what to speak of it was just very difficult. But still, Prabhupada wanted to set the example, and I was there at least, I think Prabhupada came to Dallas 5 times, or 4 or 5 times, and I was there each time, and I was with Prabhupada when he was talking to the Gurukul students and sometimes the teachers, and because I was a temple president still at that time, not in Dallas, but another temple. Therefore, I saw Prabhupada, I had darshan with Prabhupada preaching about different subject matters. And Prabhupada tried to do the best he could with what was available to establish Gurukul. So similarly, Varnashram is not so easy to follow in Kali Yuga, because people are generally Shudras, and how can a Shudra act like a Vaishya or a Kshatriya, and what to speak of a Brahmin? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Shudra who's acting as a Kshatriya is Kali, taking the place of a Kshatriya. And that simply created problems. And that's what we have nowadays, so-called Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, they're all Shudras, or less than Shudras. Still, Prabhupada had to give us the basic principles of Varnashram, especially in his books, and sometimes in his lectures and his writings, so that in the future we can establish Varnashram, this Hare Krishna movement. But who do we establish Varnashram for? It's not for the devotees in the Hare Krishna movement so much as it is for the people who don't want to join the Hare Krishna movement, but who have respect for the devotees. They don't want to, or they cannot comprehend exactly what is the process of Krishna consciousness, sadhana bhakti. In other words, the Hare Krishna movement is not simply you change your dress or your address. It's a question of changing consciousness and actually understanding, first of all, that we're not this body. As we've heard, Prabhupada said, most people take them 500 years to understand that they're not their body. So it is not so easy to begin the process of Krishna consciousness, which is supposed to begin at the platform of liberation. Bhagavad-Gita, our most basic book, begins at the platform of liberation. Denos minyata dehe kamaram yovanam jara tata dahantra praptir diryas tatra namuyati, which is the first verse I ever learned in Sanskrit in the Bhagavad-Gita, because it was drilled into my head for 2 years straight. That was practically the only verse I heard from the Bhagavad-Gita. But I still haven't realized it, but at least I can recite it. That the body is changing, but the soul is not changing. That's the basic starting. That's the level that the Kumaras are on. In the Nectar Devotion, Srila Prabhupada talks about the Chatura Vida Bhajante Mam Jana Sukritina Arjuna Arta Jagnasya Aratarati Gyani Charbharatar Shiva. That there are 4 kinds of pious people who approach him. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has told us that these 4 kinds of pious people are members of the Varna and Ashram system. The distressed are the Shudras. The Vaishyas are those who want economic development, material happiness. The Kshatriyas, they want knowledge of how to rule the universe or the world. And they get that from the Brahmins, who are going for the platform of liberation from material conceptions of life. So we find Gajendra as the example of the distressed approaching Krishna. We find Dhruva Maharaj as the example of someone who wanted some material resources. We find the sages of Naimisharanya as those who are seeking for knowledge of the truth. And we find the four Kumaras as the example of those on the platform of liberation. Therefore, the Kanishta Adhikari has 4 levels. Of course, there are many, many more levels, but the topmost Kanishta Adhikari is the pure Brahman, which is exemplified by the 4 Kumaras. Therefore, if someone says, oh, you're just a Kanishta Adhikari, you're only on the level of the 4 Kumaras, don't be insulted. Or you're only just like the sages of Naimisharanya, inquiring from Sutta Goswami. Even if we were like Gajendra calling out for Krishna, we'd be doing quite well. Therefore, Kanishta, beginning stage, before the stage of liberation, is actually exalted personalities, and Krishna also says that in the Bhagavad-Gita. Tesham jnana nityukta ekabhaktir vishishate priyo hi jnani no yartam aham sachama ma priyaha. All these 4 classes of people, they're actually quite dear to me. But the best of all of them is one who's actually on the platform of liberation, because he can actually begin real devotional service. And this movement is meant for those who are actually interested in pure devotional service, namely trying to love Krishna, Ishvare Prema. To try to love Krishna. And how do we love Krishna? We follow the instructions of our Acharya in disciple succession, who's connected with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, who are constantly feeling separation from Krishna. So by serving in the Sankirtan movement, then we're actually connecting with Ishvara in the mood of prema. Now we may not feel prema, therefore there's another aspect to the whole situation. If we have enough intelligence to to accept the process of Harinam Sankirtan as a process of perfection in this age, then as I mentioned yesterday, Srila Prabhupada points out, we may not be 100% pure and free from the 3 modes of material nature, but still if we engage our energies in the service of the Sankirtan movement, then we'll come to the platform of completely pure Krishna consciousness. So there are 2 things, as I mentioned in the beginning. One is to know what's to be done and what's not to be done, and to do what we're supposed to do, and the other to do it in the proper mood. So for those engaged in the Varna and Ashram system, they have the allurement of freedom from distress, economic development. They have the allurement of gaining knowledge so they can better control the material universe. They have prospects of getting liberation from all material misery permanently. So these prospects are there, but underneath it is the aspect of duty, that everyone has their duty to follow, and that duty is given in Shastra by the authorities such as the Brahmins, and they do it without material conception. Well, they do it as a servant of the Acharyas, or their Brahmins. So the attitude is service, and they serve according to the authorities. Similarly, for the devotees, the attitude is also service according to the Acharyas, but these Acharyas are connected in disciple succession to Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his associates. And they're giving Harinam Sankirtan. And what is the Harinam Sankirtan? What is the objective? Ultimately convincing people that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that everyone should engage whatever energies they have in the service of the Sankirtan movement. So that's the Brahmins in our movement. Brahmin means anyone with enough intelligence to understand that the purpose of life is to surrender to Krishna and go back to the spiritual world. Those who are convinced that Krishna is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it can explain how Krishna is God in a way to convince others also to engage their energies in Krishna's service. That's called preaching. Engage people's words, engaging their intelligence, engaging their wealth, engaging their lives in the Sankirtan movement. Now, for those who are convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but do not know how to convince others how to engage their energies in Krishna's service, then if they have the ability to organize the Sankirtan movement, then they should organize the Sankirtan movement and fight for Krishna's cause. Just like Arjuna fought on the battlefield Kurukshetra. At first he did not want to fight for Krishna's cause. He wanted to avoid the fight. But when he was enlightened by Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita, then he actually fought for Krishna's mission. And therefore those who are fighting by organizing the Sankirtan movement, they also can engage their energies in Krishna's service, so that the Brahmins can convince others, Brahmins, or at least the preachers, can convince others that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And for those who have no organizing power or little organizing power, who can organize people power to surrender to Krishna, and those who don't have the power to convince others to surrender to Krishna, if they have the power to get material resources, they can utilize those resources by giving them to those who have the organizing power to organize the preaching of the Sankirtan movement. And others who have no power to make money, have no power for organization, have no power for preaching, but can understand the need to spreading the Sankirtan movement, they can assist the Sankirtan movement in some way or another. And what will be the result? The result is that one will develop an attachment and attraction for hearing and chanting about Krishna. As one engages one's energies in the service of Krishna, then Krishna reciprocates and gradually purifies the heart. And when the heart is purified, then we can actually experience Krishna's presence in the holy name, Krishna's presence in the holy vibrations in his books, Krishna's presence in the deities, Krishna's presence in the devotees, Krishna's presence in the holy dhams, or the holy places that are created through the preaching movement. One will become naturally attracted by the higher experience of Krishna. And therefore, one will gradually become elevated in attraction for the 5 powerful processes that reveal Krishna to us. But there'll be, even Prabhupada mentions at the end of 1977, that even devotees are trying to engage in the Sankirtan movement, but because of the attraction for material nature, sometimes they fall down from such engagement. And therefore they find it difficult where to engage themselves in the Sankirtan movement. Therefore Prabhupada said that although we are not candidates for Varnashram Dharma, but sometime it will be necessary for the devotees to give an example of how to properly follow the Varnashram system, so that people in general will be able to apply themselves in that system also. Yad yad acharya shestas tad tad evetaro janaha siyat pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartate. Whatever great men follow, whatever great men do, common men follow. Or as it says with the 6 Goswamis, Krishnat kirtana ganana paro premamritam vo nidhi, dira dira janat priyo priyakaro, nirmatsaro pujito. So they were nirmatsara, they were not envious, and their hearts were emanating prema. Therefore, everyone became attracted to the 6 Goswamis, both the Dhira and the Adhira, both the ruffians, Prabhupada translates, and the gentle. Right now, we don't find, maybe in India we find, or maybe in Russia or some places, we have more of a following, something of a following. But in general, people, in the vast majority of people, are not overwhelmed by the prema that everyone's heart is emanating currently. Prabhupada said there are different stages of the Hare Krishna movement. In the beginning, people will, I guess, they'll mock us. I don't think we've gone that far away from that stage. And then after a while, they'll attack us. When they actually find out that the Hare Krishna movement has some power, then those who have the authority right now will not be very happy about giving that power over to the Hare Krishna movement. So generally, such personalities, they'll attack us. And ultimately, they'll adore us. And at the adoring stage, when people in general become attracted to the devotees, if they're not able to follow the process of sadhana bhakti and engage in the 5 powerful processes consistently, then they'll certainly be good candidates for the devotees to organize according to the Varna and Ashram system. But for right now, that doesn't seem to be our priority, because after Prabhupada left, well, when Srila Prabhupada was here, it seemed that the Hare Krishna movement was like a Jagannath. Jagannath meaning it was rolling on so much that Prabhupada said that there was one politician in Australia who said if the Hare Krishna movement continues at this rate, they'll take over the government in 10 years. The Australian governmental officials have nothing to worry about right now. It'll probably take a little bit more than 10 years at the present moment. Due to the power of one devotee who was on the Mahabhagavat, therefore the Hare Krishna movement spread so rapidly around the world. Currently, as we see, after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, due to our ultimately, it is not possible to imitate a Mahabhagavat. It is not possible to even understand the intricacies of even the Varnashram system, how to elevate oneself through the Varnashram system, what to speak of the mysteries of Krishna's understanding. Therefore, naturally, it's understood that after a great acharya disappears, there's a period of confusion. And perhaps we're still somewhat in that period of confusion. Therefore, we don't know where Varnashram fits in, where the Sankirtan movement fits in, even where book distribution fits in, where we fit in. We don't even know if we fit, what to speak of in. Therefore, the major thrust, from what I understand, is for whatever Prabhupada established, and what Prabhupada has principally established is the ISKCON movement. The core movement is the ISKCON movement, and the ISKCON movement is meant to spread the Hare Krishna movement. It's a preaching movement. So the core has to be there. Unless the core is there, then we won't be able to attract people from the outside. Therefore, to love Krishna means to preach the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we have to do that in the association of the devotees and exchange the loving exchanges with them. That is, tell them about Krishna, hear from them about Krishna, chant Hare Krishna together, hear together about Krishna, take prasadam and offer prasadam. This is the core values of the Hare Krishna movement that the devotees share with each other. Now we have to, just to chant Hare Krishna or to talk about Krishna seems easy enough, but loving exchanges have to be appropriately done. The topmost devotee, such as Srila Prabhupada, is the most expert at sharing these loving exchanges. Prabhupada respected everyone within his mind. Although externally it may not appear to some, that sometimes it appeared that he was criticizing others, but actually he loved everyone. He was in the same mood as Krishna. Although Krishna may chastise in the Srimad Bhagavatam different people or seemingly criticize them, Svavidra hostra karar samstuta purusha pashu niyat karna patiyo peta jatanama gadagraja. Those were like hogs, dogs, camels, asses, you hog, you dog, you camel, you ass. So Prabhupada used to say, well, I'm saying these things, but it's not me saying them, it's Krishna saying them. I'm just repeating what he said. But Prabhupada would say it just like Krishna said it, or Shukadeva Goswami said it, not out of enviousness, but out of a desire to enlighten people for where they're actually at. In the beginning, when Srila Prabhupada was dealing with the hippies, then Prabhupada preached a certain way. Later on, some years later, when there were more normal devotees in the movement, I remember one time there was one hippie there, and he looked very confused, and he asked Prabhupada a question. He said, I can't understand. And Prabhupada said, you won't be able to understand. So, not out of enviousness, but out of a desire to understand things, to explain things properly, sometimes Krishna said certain things. And similarly, Prabhupada said certain things. But within his mind, he saw everyone as Krishna's eternal servant and respected everyone, ultimately within his mind. And he knew perfectly how to cooperate, how to teach others how to cooperate to spread the Hare Krishna movement. Prabhupada knew how to cooperate even with his disciples to inspire them to spread the Hare Krishna movement. And he knew who was on what level, so he could take instructions from his acharya, and he knew even what instructions to take from ordinary persons. When one soldier in the Indian army suggested to Srila Prabhupada that it would be better if he printed hardbound books rather than softbound books, Prabhupada was able to understand that this was coming from Krishna, and he understood I should begin printing hardbound books. Similarly, when Srila Prabhupada was in Amsterdam, and I think Malati Devi Dasi was there for the installation of Lord Jagannath there. You weren't there? It was Radha Krishna. Oh, that was Radha Krishna installation. Radha Gopinath. Yes, I know them, Radha Gopinath. So Radha Gopinath installation, and Srila Prabhupada, everything went wrong. They could go wrong, especially since there was the television there at the time broadcasting everything to Holland. The devotees didn't know how to build a fire sacrifice. They didn't know what to put around the fire sacrifice. They didn't know anything, ghee, anything, what to do. And Prabhupada was becoming more and more disturbed because everything was going wrong. And although it was on television, Prabhupada visibly seemed quite angry that everything was out of order. And finally, one hippie came by, seeing that Prabhupada was so disturbed, and said, I don't remember exactly what he said, something like, peace, shanti, shanti. And then Prabhupada became very peaceful. Yes. Can you say that loud? Why don't you chant Hare Krishna? So Prabhupada picked up his beads, I believe, and began to chant Hare Krishna. So sometimes we take instructions even from a place which is not so desirable. But Prabhupada was expert at that. How to properly know who to take instructions from. And his books are full of this information. His example is an expert example of how to respect people within the mind who are chanting Hare Krishna, how to bring people to the platform of chanting Hare Krishna, how to cooperate to spread the Hare Krishna movement, and how to understand who's on what level so we can properly take instructions and follow the example of those who are higher than us, who have the proper understanding to guide us. So not only we have to learn how to exchange these loving exchanges, but we also have to know who to exchange them with. That will be the success of our Hare Krishna movement. And what is the purpose of the Hare Krishna movement? What is the preaching? It is not only book distribution, but book distribution is like the tip of the sphere, but it's to spread a cultural revolution, to convince people that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what is that cultural revolution? It's by engaging everyone's energies, whatever they may have, in the Sankirtan movement. If one can be an artist, Prabhupada engaged so many artists in painting pictures of Krishna's pastimes, engaging people in theater and music, and culture, a cultural revolution, all meant to convince people that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the beginning, we're just trying to organize the Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, to create this cultural revolution. And when it becomes powerful enough, then hopefully we can engage all the other Vaishnavas in this cultural revolution. Especially now we're fighting with some of them because we don't know how to properly deal with them. And therefore, when we become more advanced, then we can unite all the Vaishnavas, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, all the different Sampradayas, all with the mission of convincing people that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when the mission becomes very, very powerful in the future, we can, then all people are religious, whatever denomination, anyone who can accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, somehow or another can engage their energies in the cultural revolution to convince everyone that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then at that stage, there may be many people who can appreciate the devotees, who can appreciate the power of the Hare Krishna movement. And then throughout the whole world, those who are of the organizing bent and those who have the knowledge can help organize the Varna ashram system for those who don't find themselves able to directly participate in the cultural revolution. But now if we become too much trying to engage in a Varnashram system and the preaching mission, the cultural revolution, it does not become prominent in our society, then our society will become warded down rather than actually the powerful spiritual movement that will establish a cultural revolution that will ultimately be able to establish Varna ashram throughout the whole world. So that's my little understanding, what I can understand. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? Yes. Could we bring the microphone back there? Well, can you repeat it again? Because I
You were mentioning that the thrust of our movement is preaching, which, yes, but preaching and teaching, because simply preaching at people and not
Well, when
Preaching and teaching,
Yeah.
that is what this is a movement.
Yes. I wasn't really making, I meant preaching in terms of teaching people how to engage their energies in Krishna service, in the Sankirtan movement. So that's teaching. Preaching, okay, thank you. Anything else? Yes. Yeah, I'll repeat the question in case.
You were mentioning about Srila Prabhupada and his... Thank you, Maharaj. You were mentioning about Srila Prabhupada's expertise in dealing with people, and even though he was criticizing some people, but he knew how to do it properly, not to destroy relationships. What about us? To what extent and how should and what should we avoid in terms of doing what Prabhupada was doing? Are there any limitations in terms of criticizing and etc.?
Well, that criticizing requires expertise. And the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says, Anuvegam karam vakyam sattva priyahitam chayat swadaya abhyasanam chaiva vangmaya tapuchate. Generally, austerity of speech requires not to agitate people's minds, to speak in such a way that's pleasing, beneficial, truthful, and according to the Vedas. Now, in the purport, Prabhupada mentions one aspect of being able to speak what we can say strongly. So that one can speak strongly, Prabhupada says, for those who are actually one's followers or disciples. But if one is not a follower or disciple, one should not speak in such a way as to agitate their minds. And as we can see in Prabhupada's example, there are different degrees of disciples and followers too. I mean, I had Srila Prabhupada's association in different, maybe 20 different temples. Of course, we only had around 20 temples, but that's somehow or another I got. And I saw Prabhupada personally interact with many devotees. I only saw him one time. There was one in 1969, when Prabhupada gave a lecture in Buffalo. There was one boy named Bir Bhadra, he was there. And I saw Prabhupada raise his hand to tell him to stop because he was talking during the class. And that at least was my experience of Prabhupada chastising anyone. Because one time Prabhupada hit me on the head, but that was a different thing. It was just tapped me on the head. He was giving me Gayatri in New Vrindavan. And I think Pradumi had written down in diacritics the Gayatri mantra, and it was dark, and I couldn't read it. Prabhupada was repeating the mantra, and I was trying to read it, I couldn't see it. And so Prabhupada thought maybe I was asleep or something, he tapped me on my head. But generally speaking, Prabhupada was quite restrained, at least from my experience. Of course, we hear stories, sometimes Prabhupada, like here in Vrindavan, when he came before the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple, when he saw it wasn't actually ready to be installed, then he became quite disturbed, apparently. So we have to be very cautious, because if we agitate people's minds, we'll be defeating our purpose. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande Haribol.